One Saturday morning, I stumbled upon a secret that shattered everything I thought I knew about my husband. It all started with a simple grocery run. I discovered my husband James's secret family during what I thought would be a routine grocery run. It was a crisp Saturday morning, and the store was bustling with weekend shoppers. The smell of freshly baked bread lingered in the air, and the low hum of casual conversations filled the space. I was absent-mindedly pushing my cart down the produce aisle, my list crumpled in one hand, when I froze. There he was, James, my husband. He stood near a display of ripe red apples, his familiar, confident posture unmistakable. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman I didn't recognize, her laughter light and easy, as if they were sharing a private joke. Between them, a little girl with curly blonde hair and bright blue eyes tugged on his sleeve, calling him Daddy, in a voice that shattered my reality. My stomach dropped as I took in the scene. James bent down to pick up the girl, a warm smile spreading across his face. He ruffled her hair with the kind of tenderness I had always believed was reserved for our family. The woman, her name unknown to me at that moment, leaned in, her hand resting on James's arm with a familiarity that felt like a knife twisting in my chest. It was like watching a surreal, nightmarish movie unfold. The world around me seemed to blur, and the cheerful music playing over the store's speakers felt like a cruel mockery of my unraveling life. My mind screamed at me to march over there, to demand an explanation, but my feet refused to move. Instead, I turned on my heel, abandoning my half-filled cart in the middle of the aisle, and stumbled out of the store before anyone could see the tears streaming down my face. By the time I made it home, my thoughts were racing like a storm I couldn't outrun. How long had this been going on? Who was that woman, and why was James acting like a loving father to her child? The image of him holding the little girl, his smile so genuine it broke me, played over and over in my mind. When James returned home later that afternoon, he acted as if nothing was amiss. He walked through the door with his usual charm, placing a quick kiss on my cheek and asking how my day had been. His voice was steady, his demeanor so normal, it felt like gaslighting. I plastered on a smile, my voice betraying nothing as I told him it was fine. Inside though, I was unraveling. The normalcy was a calculated performance, I realized, fueled by years of deception. James had become a master of disguise, a chameleon adapting to two entirely separate worlds. That night, as James slept soundly beside me, I gave in to my growing desperation. I reached for his phone, something I had never done before. Our marriage had always been built on a foundation of trust, or so I believed. Violating that trust felt like a betrayal of myself, but I was desperate for answers. My hands trembled as I unlocked it and started scrolling, my heart pounding with every new discovery. The evidence was undeniable. There were texts, dozens of them, between James and Vanessa. Their messages ranged from affectionate exchanges to coordinated plans for family outings. My breath caught in my throat as I found photos of them together, smiling like a picture-perfect family. Vanessa, James, and the little girl, Lily, who, according to one message, was James's daughter. Worse still, I found a shared calendar detailing their lives together. Birthdays, school events, weekend trips, an entire world I hadn't known existed. It was as if James had constructed an alternate reality, complete with a second family, while I lived in blissful ignorance. The calendar was a brutal masterpiece of scheduling, a testament to James's meticulous deception. I stared at the screen, the knot in my stomach tightening until it felt unbearable. Tears blurred my vision as the weight of the truth settled over me. My husband, the man I had built my life with, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And what made it sting even more was the irony of it all. James had always assured me that our love was unshakable, that I was his one and only. I had supported him through everything, even as he leaned on my wealth to build his career, and yet he had found another woman, another family. The truth was a bitter pill to swallow. I had been a stepping stone, a means to an end for James's ambitious climb. The next morning, I woke up to find James already gone, a hastily written note on the kitchen counter saying he had an early meeting. My hands trembled as I stared at his words, the lies they held, and the truth they concealed. I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. My world was falling apart, and it was time to confront the man I thought I knew. I knew better now, the lies were unraveling, and I wasn't going to sit idly by. After James left that morning, I reached for my phone, the knot in my stomach growing tighter as I opened his shared calendar. There it was, clear as day. Breakfast with Vanessa and Lily at a small diner on the other side of town, the same Vanessa and Lily who had shattered my sense of reality just the day before. My hands trembled as I got dressed, my mind racing with every possible scenario of what I might discover. The drive to the diner felt both agonizingly slow and too quick. Before I knew it, I was parked across the street, my heart pounding in my chest. Through the large windows of the diner, I saw them. James, Vanessa, and Lily, seated in a booth near the back. James looked relaxed, smiling warmly as he leaned over to help Lily cut her pancakes. Vanessa laughed at something he said, her hand casually resting on his as if they were a perfectly happy family. The sight was gut-wrenching. It was as though I was peering into a life that should have been mine, a life where James played the devoted husband and father, except in this version, I didn't exist. My heart ached with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and profound sadness. How could he look so happy while tearing apart everything we had built? I thought of the countless times I had supported him financially and emotionally, believing in his potential and his promises. Was it all a lie? Was James even capable of genuine love, or was he simply a master manipulator, weaving his way through life, exploiting people to achieve his own selfish ends? I stayed in the car, unable to look away as they finished their breakfast. Lily giggled, her face lighting up as James handed her a small toy from his pocket. Vanessa smiled, her expression full of affection as James placed his arm around her shoulders. I bit my lip to keep from crying, the weight of their happiness crushing me. I noticed the way Vanessa looked at James, a look of genuine adoration. Could Vanessa be a victim too, unknowingly caught in James's web of deceit? When they left the diner, I followed them, keeping a safe distance. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn around and walk away, but I couldn't, not yet. James drove them to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that radiated warmth and stability. He helped Lily out of the car, gave Vanessa a quick kiss, and watched as they went inside. Then, as if nothing was out of the ordinary, he drove off, likely heading to work, carrying on with his double life. The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. I parked down the street, staring at the house for what felt like hours. My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and pain. Every memory of my life with James felt tainted, like a cruel joke. How could the man I loved, the man who swore he cherished me, have built an entirely separate existence without my knowledge? I felt a strange mix of grief for the life I thought I had and a burning desire for revenge. Finally, summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I stepped out of the car and walked to the front door. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst. When I knocked, the door opened, and there she was. Vanessa. Her eyes widened in surprise, quickly narrowing with suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cautious. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling. "I'm James's wife," I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. For a moment, Vanessa stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, with a sigh, she stepped aside. "Come in," she said, her voice tight but resigned. The inside of the house was cozy and inviting, filled with touches of family life. Soft throws on the couch, a vase of fresh flowers on the table, and framed photos lining the walls. But the photos were the hardest to look at. There they were, Vanessa, Lily, and James, smiling together at a park, posing on a beach during what looked like a vacation, celebrating Lily's birthday with a cake and balloons. Each picture was a painful reminder of the life James had built without me. It was like walking into a parallel universe, where I was the ghost, the one who didn't belong. Vanessa motioned for me to sit at the kitchen table and offered me a cup of coffee. I accepted, my hand shaking as I wrapped them around the warm mug. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the tension hanging thick in the air. "How long have you known James?" I finally asked, my voice barely audible. Vanessa hesitated, her gaze falling to her hands. 5 years, she admitted, her tone laced with regret. "We met at work. He told me he was divorced." Her words hit me like a physical blow. 5 years? That meant James had been living this double life for nearly half of our marriage. I felt like the ground beneath me had crumbled, leaving me in free fall. James had not only betrayed me but had also manipulated Vanessa, using her as a pawn in his twisted game. "And Lily?" I asked, my voice cracking. Vanessa looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "She's his daughter," she said softly. The room seemed to spin as her words sank in. 5 years, a daughter, a life I had never been a part of. I thought of the sacrifices I had made for James, the financial support I had given him when he was starting his business, the long nights I had spent believing in our future. And all the while, he had been building a future with someone else. "He's been a part of her life since the day she was born," Vanessa said softly, her words settling over me like a heavy fog. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself as my mind raced to process everything I had just learned. James hadn't just been unfaithful, he had an entire second life, a second family, and he had been hiding it from me for years. Every moment I thought I had understood my marriage felt like a lie, unraveling thread by thread. As the truth unfolded, Questions flooded my mind. How had James kept this a secret for so long? How had I not seen the signs? Was I so blinded by trust, or perhaps by love, that I had missed the cracks forming right in front of me? I replayed memories in my mind, searching for clues I had overlooked, moments when James's behavior had seemed slightly off, but I had dismissed it. The realization that I had been so easily deceived was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. Vanessa broke the silence, her voice hesitant. "There's something else you should know." I braced myself for another blow. Vanessa left the room and returned moments later, holding a folder. She set it down in front of me, her expression a mix of guilt and apprehension. What's this?" I asked, though my trembling hands had already begun flipping through the documents. Inside were pages that painted an even darker picture: custody agreements, child support payments, even a will. I stared at the papers, my heart sinking deeper with each revelation. According to the documents, James had been financially supporting Vanessa and Lily for years. He had even listed Lily as his beneficiary in the event of his death. My breath caught in my throat. The money that I thought was going toward our home, our future, was being used to support his secret life. "He told me you knew," Vanessa said quietly, her words tinged with guilt. "He said you two had an arrangement, that you were okay with it as long as he didn't bring it up around you." Anger surged through me, white-hot and unrelenting. "That's a lie," I said, my voice trembling with fury. I had no idea any of this was happening. Vanessa's eyes widened, her expression shifting from guilt to shock. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know he was lying to both of us. I thought—" She stopped, shaking her head. It was clear that Vanessa had been manipulated too, a puppet in James's elaborate game. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of James's betrayal pressing down on us like a lead blanket. For Vanessa, this was the unraveling of a reality she thought was solid. For me, it was the destruction of a life I thought was real. The irony was cruel. Two women, both victims of the same man's deceit. And then Vanessa said something that stopped me cold. "There's something else," she began, her voice hesitant. "James has been talking about leaving you. He says he wants to be with me and Lily full time." Her words were like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. My vision blurred as the enormity of it hit me. James wasn't just hiding a secret family, he was planning to leave me for them. He had been actively planning my replacement, envisioning a future where I was erased from his life. For a moment, I felt paralyzed. Part of me wanted to confront him, to scream and cry and demand answers, but another part of me knew I couldn't act rashly. James had spent years lying to me, creating a web of deceit so intricate I hadn't seen through it until now. If he was capable of this, what else could he be hiding? What else might he be willing to do to protect his secret? I also realized James was a liar and manipulator. I could use it against him. If he thought I knew nothing, maybe I could trick him into revealing more. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I pushed my emotions aside. I needed to be smart about this. Rash decisions wouldn't help me now, not when I needed evidence, proof of what James had done. I decided to play along for now and leave the rest for later, as a surprise. Over the next several weeks, I meticulously documented everything. I kept screenshots of texts and photos, copied financial records, and even noted down dates and times of James' suspicious behavior. Every interaction with him felt like a game of chess where one wrong move could cost me everything. When James left the house, I hired John, a private investigator, to dig deeper into his life. I gave them every piece of information I had, hoping they could uncover the parts of James' web that I couldn't reach on my own. I also consulted with Mr. Smith, a seasoned divorce attorney known for his sharp mind and unwavering commitment to his clients. He advised me to remain calm and collected, gathering as much evidence as possible before making my next move. During those weeks, I felt like I was living a double life of my own. By day, I played the role of the devoted wife, smiling and nodding at James's lies, pretending I didn't see the cracks in his facade. By night, I pored over the evidence, piecing together a timeline of his betrayal. It was exhausting, emotionally and physically, but the anger that simmered beneath the surface kept me going. I thought of the sacrifices I had made for James, the way I had poured my heart and my wealth into supporting his dreams, believing we were building a life together. And all the while, he had been building a life with someone else. The thought of James's deceit fueled my resolve. He was the ultimate manipulator and he would have to pay the price. I didn't know what my next move would be, but I knew this much. James's double life was about to come crashing down, and I would make sure I was the one holding the match. I started acting more clingy with James, feigning ignorance and showering him with affection. James's guilt was palpable. I could feel it, his behavior becoming increasingly erratic. He started showering me with expensive gifts, and taking me on lavish dates in an attempt to cover his tracks. His guilt was palpable. All the while, I secretly photographed the gifts, and kept record of everywhere he took me. The attorney had advised me to collect as much as possible in case I needed to use it in the divorce. Unraveling James' double life turned out to be even more shocking than I could have imagined. John, the private investigator's findings painted a picture far worse than I had anticipated. Not only was James funneling money from our joint accounts into a secret savings account in Vanessa's name, but he was also siphoning funds into another account linked to a completely different state. The account was used for expenses for another woman, John said. When John asked for more details, the investigator hesitated before delivering the bombshell. Vanessa and Lily weren't James's only secret family. He had another child, a son, Ethan, living with a different woman hundreds of miles away. My head spun as John explained that James had been splitting his time, his finances, and his affection between not just 2 families, but 3. It felt like a cruel twist in a story that was already unbearable. I had spent years supporting James, both emotionally and financially. I had believed in his dreams, his ambitions, and the life we were building together, and yet he had betrayed me in ways that felt almost incomprehensible. I questioned my intuition, my judgment, the essence of what I thought I knew about James and our life together. Armed with the mountain of evidence I had gathered, I knew it was time to confront him. No more hiding, no more pretending. I set a date for the confrontation and calls my attorney and private investigator for any last-minute tips. That evening, I sat in the kitchen, the folder of documents spread out in front of me like a weapon. When James walked through the door, his usual cheerful self, he was completely unaware of the storm he was about to face. He kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day had been, the same casual question he always asked as if everything was normal. He tried to be playful with me, not knowing that I was about to explode. "James, we need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. He frowned, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What's going on?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down." He obeyed, his confusion growing. I slid the folder toward him and folded my hands in my lap, keeping my gaze locked on his face. I had spent the entire day picturing this moment, visualizing his response, bracing myself for the lies and manipulations I knew would follow. I resolved to remain calm, to not let my emotions get the best of me. This was a strategic move, and I had to remain in control. "What's this?" he asked, his tone light, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. He reached for the folder with a forced smile, trying to project an air of nonchalance. "Open it," I said. My voice was steady, even as anger simmered beneath the surface. James hesitated, but eventually opened the folder. I watched as he flipped through the pages, his face shifting from confusion to disbelief, then to pale panic. His hand shook slightly as he set the papers down, and he looked up at me with wide eyes. He looked like he was about to cry. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice rising. His attempt at composure had crumbled, revealing the fear and desperation beneath. "I hired John, a private investigator," I replied coolly. "And I talked to Vanessa. I know everything, James, about her, about Lily, about Ethan, the son you have in another state. I know about the money you've been stealing from our accounts. I know it all." I watched his face, the flicker of recognition, the realization that his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. For a moment, James just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. When he finally spoke, it was to offer excuses, his voice desperate and pleading. "It's not what you think," he stammered. "I never meant to hurt you. I got in over my head and I didn't know how to get out." His eyes were now fully red, as if he was about to cry. "You didn't know how to get out?" I interrupted, my voice shaking with rage. "You've been lying to me for years, James, years. You've been living a double life, no, a triple life, and you didn't think that would hurt me?" The dam had broken, and the anger I had suppressed for weeks poured out in a torrent of hurt and fury. He tried again, his tone shifting to apologetic. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but it wasn't about you. I was trying to—" He sounded like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, offering feeble excuses in a desperate attempt to escape the consequences. "Stop," I snapped, my anger boiling over. "You don't get to apologize. You don't get to act like the victim here. You made your choices, James. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and you stole from me. Don't stand there and act like this was some accident you couldn't control. You knew exactly what you were doing." I stood up, pacing the kitchen, unable to contain the whirlwind of emotions churning inside me. James's face fell, and for a moment he looked utterly defeated. He reached across the table as if to take my hand, but I pulled away. "I don't want your excuses," I said coldly. "I don't want your apologies. You made your bed, and now you're going to lie in it." I spat the words out, each one a sharp condemnation of his actions. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. James stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and desperation. "Wait," he said, his voice cracking. "We can fix this. I can fix this." He was starting to sob now, realizing that everything he had worked for, everything he had carefully built on a foundation of lies, was about to crumble. "No, James," I said firmly. "You've already destroyed everything. There's nothing left to fix." I was done, completely and utterly done. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't going to let James's lies define me or dictate my future. I had spent too long being his support, his safety net, while he took everything I gave and used it to build lives with other women. I realized this has taught me a lesson, and I am now stronger than ever. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving James alone with the evidence of his betrayal. In that moment, I knew I was done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, and the heartbreak. It was time to take back control of my life, and I wasn't going to let James or anyone else stand in my way. "I'm filing for divorce," I told James, my voice steady and resolute. "And I intend to take everything you have." The words left my lips with a sense of finality, and for the first time, James seemed to grasp the gravity of what was happening. He tried to argue, to beg for another chance, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done, there was no going back. I calmly walked towards my bedroom, grabbed a suitcase and started packing my clothes. James was still in shock in the kitchen, knowing that his carefully built life has fallen. He didn't bother to stop me, nor was there any resistance. That night, I packed a bag in silence. I didn't bother explaining myself further. What was there left to say? James had spent years spinning his web of lies, and now he would face the consequences. I stayed with Ashley, a close friend who welcomed me with open arms and provided a safe space as I tried to piece together my next steps. I was thankful for my friends. They kept me sane. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal battles, emotional breakdowns, and moments of doubt. James fought me every step of the way, but the evidence was undeniable. The documents I had collected, the financial records, and even the testimony of Vanessa painted a clear picture of his betrayal. My lawyer, Mr. Smith, assured me I had the upper hand, but it didn't make the process any less draining. Mr. Smith advised me to stay calm and level-headed, and to let him handle everything in court. He promised that justice will prevail. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. I was awarded the house, the majority of our savings, and full custody of our children. James was ordered to pay child support and alimony, though I knew no amount of money could ever compensate for the damage he had caused. The court also ordered James to provide financial support for Lily and Ethan, his 2 secret children. It was a small victory, but it offered some sense of closure. When the divorce was finalized 6 months later, I felt a bittersweet sense of relief. I often lay awake questioning how I could have missed the signs, how the man I loved could have deceived me so completely. James tried to stay involved, insisting he wanted to remain a part of our children's lives, but trust was a bridge he had burned beyond repair. I allowed him supervised visits, carefully monitored and structured. I wasn't willing to risk him weaving his lies into their lives as he had mine. Vanessa reached out to me a few times during that period. Her messages were filled with apologies and regret. She admitted that when she first met James, she had no idea he was married. By the time she learned the truth, she was already entangled in his life. I didn't hold her entirely to blame. The fault lay with James, the man who had deceived both of us. I met with Vanessa over a cup of coffee, and the two of us shared our experiences with James. We both agreed that it was better to move on and live a better life without James and his lies. After the meeting, Vanessa and I parted ways and never met again. We both went our separate ways. 5 years have passed since that fateful day in the grocery store. While the pain hasn't completely disappeared, it has dulled over time, becoming a distant ache rather than an all-consuming wound. I've learned to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. I've even started dating, slowly, cautiously, but with an open heart. It's a strange feeling, letting someone new into my life after everything I've been through, but it's also hopeful, a reminder that love in its truest form isn't about lies or betrayal. I started attending a grief support group, where I met other women who had experienced similar betrayals. Sharing my story and listening to theirs helped me realize I wasn't alone, that my experiences were valid, and that I was not to blame for James's actions. The support group became a source of strength and healing, a reminder that I was capable of rebuilding my life and finding happiness again. As for James, his lies eventually caught up with him. He lost not only me but also Vanessa and the other family he had tried to keep hidden. The webs he spun unraveled completely, leaving him alone to face the wreckage he had created. A part of me feels sorry for him, but I know this is the bed he made for himself. I heard that he had moved out of state. The last I heard, he was working as a car salesman, struggling to make ends meet and haunted by the consequences of his actions. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that resilience is a quiet, powerful force. Life may not always unfold the way we expect, but we have the strength to pick up the pieces and create something new. I found strength in my family and friends. They became my core group of support, reminding me that I was loved and worthy of happiness. Looking back, I don't recognize the woman I was before, the one who blindly trusted, who gave everything without question. I'm stronger now, wiser, and while the scars remain, they are a testament to what I've overcome. The chapter with James is closed, and though it ended painfully, it's taught me lessons I'll carry with me forever. The most important lesson being is to always remember that I am worthy of happiness, and trust my own self. After James, I have vowed never to trust anyone as easily. One sunny afternoon, while volunteering at a local animal shelter, I met a kind-hearted veterinarian named Ben. He shared my love for animals and my desire to make a difference in the world. Our connection was immediate and genuine, built on shared values and mutual respect. As our relationship deepened, I found myself opening up to Ben, sharing my story of betrayal and loss. He listened with empathy and understanding, offering me unwavering support and reassuring me that I was worthy of love. With Ben, I felt safe and secure. He wasn't afraid to show his emotions, and he treated me with the respect and admiration I deserved. As time passed, I realized that I was falling in love again, this time with a man who valued honesty, integrity, and genuine connection. I learned that love after betrayal isn't just possible, but it can be more profound than anything I've ever known. Love can heal old wounds and provide a glimmer of hope. One evening, under the starlit sky, Ben proposed to me. Tears of joy streamed down my face as I said yes. In that moment, I knew that my life was finally on the right path, that I had found a love that was true and lasting. The wedding was a small and intimate affair, surrounded by close friends and family. As I walked down the aisle, I saw Ben waiting for me, his eyes filled with love and anticipation. In that moment, I knew that I had found my happy ending. My story isn't just one of betrayal and loss, it's a story of resilience, strength, and the unwavering power of hope. It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable pain, we are capable of rebuilding our lives and finding happiness again. We can move on, but we must never forget.